was the other fight. There wasn't just one fight. It wasn't just Jake Paul, Tyron Woodley. There was also an undercard featuring Deron Williams and Frank Gore, the former NBA All-Star Deron Williams, the former NFL, recently retired NFL star Frank Gore, who, again, was receiving calls and receiving interest in playing in the NFL this year. He turned them down to pursue some of these boxing opportunities. And the bout was actually kind of initially was supposed to be a legitimate fight, and it was reversed and turned into an exhibition by the Florida State Boxing Commission. And Deron Williams won via split decision. Said the scorecard was about 38-37, 37-38, 40-35. Let me first say this. Shout out to both those guys. Shout out to both those guys for their willingness to participate, for their willingness to put on this fight. This isn't just like a backyard fight where you've got a couple hundred fans, rough and rowdy. Their first professional fighting debut was on pay-per-view in a sold-out arena with millions of people watching. It's their credit. They owned it. And they were willing to take on one another under these kind of extenuating circumstances, in my opinion. And it was actually vastly entertaining, a lot more entertaining than I thought it was going to be. And they are two big dudes. It's so interesting because you see Deron Williams on a basketball court and you see him next to all these other NBA guys, and you're saying, he looks stocky and buff, but he doesn't look that big compared to LeBron or a center. And you look at Frank Gore and you see him in all these pads, you don't fully understand the mass and the volume that he takes up. And then you see these guys with their shirts off and 12-ounce gloves on, and they're delivering blow after blow, and they're absorbing them. And that's when you realize, whoa, these guys are actually huge. These guys are actually huge. And again, to their credit, they were actually landing some vicious punches. They were staying in there. Unfortunately, Frank Gore just became the world's new favorite meme going around, where you almost look like you've seen ghosts, where you can see the whites of people's eyes, where they roll back into your head because of a couple vicious punches that were landed by Deron Williams. But this is the interesting thing for me. And this was a question that I was contemplating prior to watching this all together, which was, well, what was the impetus behind this fight? Because to me, the question always becomes, fights are inherently entertaining. People, they just want to see two people fight. Why? I don't know. There's something interesting. There's something enticing inherently in that. So outside of that, what is going to be the hook? What is going to glue people to the television that's going to bring them away from whatever else they're doing to watch this specific event? Typically, it's narrative. It's storyline. There's some intriguing aspect of the fight, of the matchup, that gravitates people towards a television set. Maybe they've got previous history. There's some connection between the two of them. My biggest problem with this fight, heading into it at least, was why these two guys? Obviously, Deron Williams wrestled in high school, and he's a part owner of a gym now, and Frank Gore has been doing some boxing training for several years. But outside of that, where's the animus between these two specific gentlemen? And clearly it wasn't there, and it still wasn't there. You could see at the very end of the fight how congratulatory they were of one another, which I'm not advocating that they needed to be hostile towards one another, or that there needed to be any kind of contentious relationship between the two. I'm not saying that, but typically that's what makes it more intriguing. You see Conor McGregor and his fights against Dustin Poirier, there is true bad blood, true bad intentions between those two guys. So it's interesting to see them fight. But to their credit, Deron Williams and Frank Gore, they stepped out into the ring, and it was captivating. We bought it. They sold it. It looked like two guys who had disdain for one another out in the ring. And it was something that at least was worth my time. But I will say, when it comes to the actual fight itself and the technique, I mean, Deron Williams, to me, the biggest difference was the 6'3" to 5'9" juxtaposition was the main difference. I mean, you look at Deron Williams, he's 6'3". The weight was classified at 215 pounds, but his reach with the extensive wingspan was the main difference because he could attack Frank Gore from a farther distance to protect himself a little bit. He was a lot more powerful with his punches. And I think that the sheer size and the sheer magnitude of Deron Williams was just a little bit too much for Frank Gore because Gore had to get really close to Williams to strike him. And that can be a really dangerous and perilous strategy in the fight game because you just look at the size and the length of Deron Williams, and he just wasn't nearly as exposed quite often. And typically, he had Frank Gore on the ropes. Again, those are two big guys, and Deron Williams pushed Frank Gore through the ropes at one point and had him cornered a couple times. In fact, he landed more punches. They officially scored it 48-39 as far as landed punches. Power punches 35-28 advantage. And again, you just kind of forget how big Deron Williams is at 6'3". Frank Gore just 5'9". Entertaining, though. It was definitely an entertaining fight. And again, shout out to both those guys for their willingness to simply compete in that, because that was a pretty big stage to make your fighting debut. I will say that.